Assalamu alaikum, dear participants, to this session of our Islam Study Circle. We're going to discuss Quranic verses and Hadith and then some Bible verses as well in this session. Let me start off by reading out the Quranic verses before you. These verses, as you can see, are taken from the 3rd Surah, Surah Al-Imran, verses are 26 and 27. They read, قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. Say, Lord, the Master of sovereignty, you grant sovereignty to whom you please and take it away from whom you please. You grant honor to whom you please and humiliate whom you please. All good lies in your authority. Indeed, you have power over all things. You make the night pass into the day and the day to pass into the night. And you bring forth the living from the dead and bring forth the dead from the living. And you give unlimited sustenance to whom you please. So viewers, you can see that the power and providence of God is expressed in these Quranic verses. And as I have indicated many times before, that if you understand these verses in the backdrop of the context, you'll get to realize that it was in the idolatrous background of Arabia that these verses were revealed. And as we all know, that the idolaters, they had this thinking that they can reach God by actually reaching out to some of their deities, and they thought that God had divided his kingdom and his power through various deities, and they could reach the ultimate God through these deities, and hence if they prayed to them or they had their own ways with them, they would succeed before God. So we find a recurring theme in the Quran, and this recurring theme is that the Almighty continues to say that everything belongs to Him, the power belongs to Him. In His hands is all goodness. He creates everything. He actually is the person, He is the being who is going to put an end to everything. And then it also says that He is the God who actually makes the dead alive and alive dead, and He is the one who creates life. He is the one who makes the day pass into the night and the night pass into the day. So for a person who might be reading the Quran in this way, it might be a cause of little surprise that why is it that His authority is being expressed every now and then, and why is it that God continues to assert that it is His providence and His power which is prevailing in this universe. So if you view this in the backdrop of the atmosphere of polytheism which was prevailing in Arabia in those times, these verses become very meaningful. And if we do not have this background in our mind, we might think that this continuous assertion of authority and power and providence by the Almighty, what exactly is the relevance of this? So we need to understand this relevance, that the mushrikun, or the idolaters of Arabia, had divided God's authority. They had made various demigods, various semi-gods, which they would actually attribute and ascribe various responsibilities, and as a result they would say that it is they that they are wishing so that they can come closer to actual God. So here actually there is a particular context also in this Surah Al-Imran where these verses occur, and here actually what is being said is that the Israelites who formerly had the reins of Shahada, or delivering the truth to mankind, they have been deposed from their position, and now the Ishmaelites have been given this position of presenting and delivering the truth to the whole mankind after the Israelites had miserably failed in their responsibility. And it is at this juncture in the Quran that these verses occur, and it is said that people must not be surprised or amazed at what has happened, because God, according to His law of justice, has made this happen. So the other thing that needs to be realized is that whenever the expression of God's authority occurs in a way in which it is said that God does this and God does that and no one can stop Him and He has power over everything, So what is being said here is that none of the deities that these people think have any sort of influence on the Almighty. It is the Almighty Himself who is going to do various tasks. And the other thing which is stressed here is that if He does something as is expressed here, and it is related to His will, when the words are tu'izzu man tasha'u wa tuzillu man tasha'u, which actually give the meaning that He gives honor to whomsoever He wills and He humiliates whomsoever He wills. So if we study the Quran, we realize that this expression of will is always conditional to His justice. So if He humiliates someone, it is according to His law, the law of justice. If He gives honor to someone, again, it is according to some certain principle that He has. It's not in a haphazard way that He humiliates people or He gives them honor. There are a lot of things which go on in this world which we are not able to understand, but the Almighty here says that His hikmah, His wisdom and His justice, they govern whatever He does. And if some act before us looks to be an act of injustice or oppression, we need to realize that the Almighty is doing something according to the grand scheme of things that He has prepared for all of us. At times things appear differently for what they actually are meant to be. At times we think that oppression or needless oppression is going on in this world, and at times we think that people who are absolutely sinful and who are rogues and ruffians, they are being rewarded and they are being taken care of by the Almighty much more than those who were supposed to be among the righteous. So here it is, we have to understand that when the Almighty lets something happen, it is governed by His justice, it is governed by His reason, it is governed by His wisdom. And this justice, reasoning and wisdom prevail, and at times we are not able to fully understand this justice and wisdom and this reasoning. And it is at this juncture, it is at this instance that we need to realize that we have to repose our trust in the Almighty, and we have to realize that if He is doing something that is beyond our comprehension, or we are not being able to understand it, He is doing it according to the grand scheme of things. And viewers, many of us realize in hindsight, whenever something happens, that at the time it was happening, we did not like it to happen. But in hindsight, in retrospection, when we look back, we think that whatever has happened did happen for our own benefit, for our own good. And there are so many experiences, there are so many examples in our lives in which we find that whatever happened actually happened for our own benefit. And even if it was something which we found to be very distasteful and we disliked it, we ultimately ended up concluding that the Almighty had meant something good for us. He had wanted to make us realize some of our follies. At times He wanted to make us rise to the occasion. At times He wanted to develop our latent and our inner potentials, which only develop when we are, of course, passing through tough circumstances. At times He is giving us opportunity to earn more reward, bonus reward, by being extra resolute and extra steadfast in various difficult and trying circumstances. And as you can see, that the power of God, His providence, His wisdom, His mercy, they are all His attributes which we can see in our own minute cells as well. So the attributes of God, you can see that these attributes on a very smaller scale are found in human beings as well. So this power, this providence, this wisdom, this justice is evident from the system of this world that man has, or human beings have endeavored to set up. And hence we need to understand that whatever is going on in this world, in the face of human beings controlling various things or doing various things, it's a very small reflection of how the Almighty will actually conduct things in the hereafter, or He does conduct them when this world is still going on. But what needs to be understood here is that the providence and power of the Almighty in the background or the backdrop of idolatry, of polytheism in the times of the Prophet needed to be expressed again and again, time and again, so that people come to realize that the fountainhead of power lies with the Almighty. It is the Almighty who controls everything, as this verse says, بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرِ, in His hand is good. And that, إِنَّكَ عَلَىٰ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, He has power over everything. And two very prominent phenomena are actually given as examples, that if the night comes and then goes away and gives way to the day, and similarly the day goes away and gives way to the night, then these two phenomena are actually governed by God Himself. and it is He who brings the dead back to life. He will do so in the hereafter, and it is He who actually gives death to people who are living. So it is not that there's someone else, there's a God of death, or there's a God of life, or there's a God of the night, or there's a God of the day. No, everything is being controlled by a single intention, a single will, and that is the will of the Almighty, and all the rest are subservient to Him. Here is now, let's move on to the next part of our study circle, and this is the Hadith of the day that we are going to study today. As you can see, this Hadith has been taken by the Al-Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. I'll read out its text before you and then translate it as well. So it says, An Hafs ibn Asim قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كفى بالمرء كذبا أن يحدث بكل ما سمع. Hafs ibn Asim stated that God's messenger said, it is enough for a person to be regarded a liar if he narrates things he hears without verifying them. So this is a very common evil which the Prophet has actually pointed out here. And if we analyze our gatherings, if we analyze our sittings, if we analyze our various hanging outs as well when we come and talk to each other, one of the very prominent things that goes unchecked in our conversations is spreading hearsay. So without verifying news, without actually verifying whether something which came to our knowledge was actually the truth or not, we actually transmit it to others without realizing that this can cause a lot of harm to the honor and respect of certain people about which we are actually narrating this hearsay. So verifying something before transmitting it is of utmost importance, and it is precisely for this reason, viewers, that you might also realize that what has been actually handed down to us from the Prophet himself has been subjected to a lot of scrutiny. It has been subjected to a lot of research and evaluation through tools of historical and hadith criticism, so that whatever is being said in the name of the Prophet is actually being first verified whether he actually said them or not, because we know that there has been a mass-scale fabrication of and concoction of narratives in the 2nd or 3rd century, when people actually wrongly ascribed to the Prophet many statements so that they could produce a stress in what they wanted to convey to people. And our Rijal authorities actually made this a point that anything which comes out from the mouth of the Prophet or is attributed to the Prophet must be verified. It must be evaluated whether he really said those words or not, or whether the person who is transmitting them is actually transmitting the right substance of what he heard, or what he has heard. So you can see how sensitive this is, that Muslims in their early centuries, they made this arrangement that anything from the mouth of the Prophet which is reported after he has passed away by a couple of individuals must be verified at all costs. It must be evaluated according to the principles of hadith criticism, and of course according to the principles of historical criticism, so that anything which is given to us is not given in an unverified way. And thereby our worthy authorities of the first centuries have actually give this teaching that whenever we hear something or whenever we narrate something from someone, it is of utmost importance to verify what we have said, because if we play our role in transmitting information which does not have any ground, which does not have any basis, of course this can cause a lot of commotion, a lot of unrest, and a lot of bad mouthing regarding people, regarding events. And this of course is something which is very disturbing for the society. It is something which can cause a lot of unrest and needless commotion in the society. And also, my dear viewers, it is also the call of justice and the requisite of justice that we must not transmit information about which we have little, scanty or no knowledge. Today we are guilty of transmitting without actually feeling any qualms about it, without actually feeling anything which weighs down upon our conscience that we are doing something wrong. So we have to check ourselves, and the best check of this is that whenever we utter something, we must ask ourselves if we are transmitting information that has been properly verified, if we are transmitting information which has been properly checked, and if there is even a slight doubt, because you see, a thing is either 100% to the best of our knowledge, or even if it's 99%, it's not correct. So a 99% is still a zero to us, and even if we think that there are certain things which are 99% correct, even then we must not transmit them unless we are 100% sure that what we have seen or what we have heard is our direct experience. It's not, it does not rely on hearsay. It does not rely on how people have sought these things out. As we can all see that one of the weapons of Satan is that he makes us jealous of other people. He makes us envious of other people. And when this jealousy and this envy overcomes us, one of the biggest things that we do is that we try to besmear the personality of the person that we are jealous of. And what we do is we at times transmit wrong information, absolutely wrong information, not only because we think that this is maybe it's not fully verified. At times this is the case, and at times we do it purposefully so that we damage the reputation of people who are jealous of us, or maybe other people who in their jealousy do this. So we need to realize, dear viewers, that whatever the criteria we have in front of us, they are all common sense criteria. We have to verify any news, and I think most importantly in today's world where this hearsay and this verification of news applies the most is, of course, to our many social media and news channels as well. So at times social media and print media and electronic media, although there are examples in which they try their best to spread only that information which has been verified, but still this phenomenon of breaking news, or to break the news first, at times makes people jump to conclusion in hastiness. And instead of first finding out whether what they are transmitting is the right information or not, they end up transmitting the wrong information, and then at times they have to correct it even. So our media, our social media, our print media, electronic media, and all of us in our personal capacity, it's much better to stay silent. It's much better to say nothing at all than to transmit wrong news, than to transmit something which despises people, which actually is a source of maligning them, which is a source of bringing them into disrepute. So this is a very important admonition, I would say, which has been given to us by our beloved Prophet, and we must realize that in our everyday gatherings this goes on unchecked, and whether it's out of slackness, it could be out of jealousy, it could be out of other reasons. Whatever the reason, we must not transmit any information. And in this regard, of course, of paramount importance is negative information. And when that negative information is transmitted, it causes a lot of uproar and commotion in the society, which we must not do. As far as the criteria itself is concerned, that how should we judge whether something is right or wrong, of course this is all based on common sense. Either we have to be an eyewitness, and then again we have to realize that at times what we are transmitting from a person is our own understanding. So we also need to make this a point that when we transmit an information which might be a statement from someone, we have to say that this is how my understanding of that person's statement is. If I'm reporting something from someone, then that is my understanding, and I could be wrong as well. So that is why it is essential to say this is how I understood, because there is a chance that even if I was there and I was listening correctly or watching correctly, even then there could be some things which are left to my understanding, in which my understanding could have faltered. So it is equally more important that when we transmit verified news as well, or verified information, at times that verified information is, since it is based on interpretation, we have to tell us that this is how I interpret, this is how I have understood certain things, and therefore if I am saying something, it is because I have understood them in this way. And viewers, let me remind you, this is precisely why in our Hadith collections also we find this word aw kama qal, how the Prophet said, or what the Prophet said. So whenever a narrator transmits something, or a recorder of Hadith says something on behalf of the Prophet, he actually transmits the understanding of the narrators, of the reporters, of the ruwat, and then he also admits that aw kama qala, or which means that, or how the Prophet must have said such and such a thing, which actually admits the fact that he is acknowledging that he might be wrong in whatever he is transmitting. So viewers, let us now come to the third part of our study session, and this is the Bible verse of the day. I have chosen this Bible verse from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter number 14, verses 12 to 14. And these are the words of Jesus, which I'm going to narrate before you, or allegedly it is what he has said, according to the Gospel of St. Luke. So the words are, "And Jesus said to the master of the house, when you give a feast, do not send for your friends and your brothers and your family or your neighbors who have wealth, for they may give a feast for you, and so you will get a reward. But when you give a feast, send for the poor and the blind and those who are broken in body, and you will have a blessing, because they will not be able to give you any payment, and you will get your reward when the upright come back from the dead." So this is a very beautiful advice which Jesus gave to his followers, and said that when you throw a banquet for people, don't always go after people who are rich. And in fact, because it was the general tradition in the times of Jesus that people who would be poor, people who would be broken in their backs, as this verse says, or people who would have no wealth, they would not be invited to these banquets and these feasts, because the person who would be throwing this banquet would feel ashamed that he has invited people who are not up to his standard of living, or who are lowly in standards. So Jesus is actually pointing this rampant tradition in his society, and which unfortunately we find today also in our societies, that when we invite people to banquets, when we invite people to various parties and various gatherings, it is our will that we should not invite people who are of lesser status, because we think that when we invite people of lesser status and they come and visit us in our parties, in our various gatherings, other people might think of us that as if we are lowly or lesser in standard. So we need to realize that this is something which is of a very lowly character, that if we think that we have friends, if we have colleagues, if we have relatives who have a lesser status, lesser financial status than our own selves, then simply because we would feel ashamed for them attending our banquets, we do not call them. This is not the right way, and the Prophet Jesus has expressed this in a very, very effective and a very moving and a very meaningful way. And he said that send for the poor and the blind and those who are broken in the body, those who are the downtrodden, those who have been left out or left far behind in the race of life. Jesus is telling them it is there that you must call first, and it is there that you must make a point to call to your own banquets. So, dear viewers, this is a lesson that we must all learn, and that we must also realize that it is the scheme of the Almighty, in which there are some people who are rich and there are some people who are not rich at all, who are poor, who have even a difficult life to face when they get up in the morning. They don't know whether they will have enough to eat in the afternoon or at night. They go to bed hungry, they get up in the morning hungry. And this is at times a very big trial for those who have been given these riches. And the biggest trial is, of course, that people who are rich, people who have been given affluence by the Almighty, they must share their blessings. They must share their blessings at all cost with the deprived. They must realize that if they have been born with a silver spoon in their mouth, it is not because that they deserved it. It is not because they deserved it. It is because it is a trial from the Almighty. It is a test from the Almighty. These riches, this wealth, these assets, and the things that we have are actually something which the Almighty has given us. And so many a time, viewers, we see people being deprived of them in the wink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, a person might be at the top rung of a society and he ends up totally at the bottom one, because the Almighty strips him of all these blessings and his favors. And so many examples we can see in our society if we have open our eyes and look around us. They are basically an object lesson for us to realize that if there are people around us who are less off than us, then it is our responsibility to reach out to them as much as we can. We should reach out to them. And in this regard, the closer a person is to us, the more right he has on us. If he is our relative, then instead of reaching out to other people who might be poor or who might be deprived, his right on us or her right on us is the foremost. We must start with the people who are near us, people who are our neighbors, people who live near us. We must start with them, and we must try to be as charitable and as possible. And in this regard, we must also realize that charity is not just on the basis of the money that we have. Charity is at times a very, very important thing which we can give from our own skills, from our time, from our efforts. Charity is not merely from what we do through our wealth. Charity, something more than that, and that is that we are able to give time. We are able to lend a shoulder to people who are deprived. We are able to give them this comfort that we are there for them. We can listen to their cries. We can listen to their calls when they are in distress. And also, dear viewers, one of the important things that we need to realize when we are talking about the Almighty and charitable behavior and how His prophets themselves put up this charitable behavior, we must realize that they became the embodiments of this charitable behavior. And this example that they gave to us was that they never actually expressed their favor on people to whom they did this favor. So the Quran has, at one stage has said, in one instance has said, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la tubtilu sadaqatikum bil manni wal aza, which means that believers, you must not let your charity go in vain by expressing your favor on the person that you did your favor. And in this way, you hurt that person. As it is, the person whom you actually do a favor, he feels his self-esteem is compromised. And therefore, if you express and make him remember that you did something good to him later in life, and you make him remember what you did to him in the past, this is something which is at times really hurting for that person. And we have to realize that we must not hurt people simply because we have done something good. And we must also realize that charity starts with our own selves. We have to be charitable to our own selves. We have to be people who have to wake up to the calls of our conscience. We have to wake up to the needs of the society. We have to look after other people. If we have been blessed by the Almighty, then it has to be something which has to be distributed. And as the Prophet Jesus has actually said at some other instances regarding the guidance that he was disseminating amongst his followers, he said that whatever I have gained for free, I am passing it on for free. And he was particularly referring to the guidance of the Almighty. So today also, if we are able to pass on some good words to other people, some good words of advice to other people, it has to be because we are responsible for the society that we live in. We are responsible for the people around us. So viewers, with these words, we come to an end to this first part of our study circle. We discussed the Quranic verses from Surah Al-Imran, in which we found out that the power and the providence and the wisdom of God are emphatically stated, so that people in the times of the Prophet who had become prone to polytheism, they are told that all power belongs to God, and if He is actually deposing the Israelites and then placing the Ishmaelites in their position to convey the truth to the rest of mankind, it is because He is doing His selection on the basis of His wisdom. And we had also studied the Hadith of Imam Muslim, of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that what a bad thing hearsay is, and we must not spread unverified information. And finally, in the Bible verses, we actually studied the two verses from chapter number 14 of the Gospel of St. Luke, in which Jesus has actually said emphatically that when we invite people to our banquet, we must invite the poor and the deprived and the blind and those who have become downtrodden, because if we do not do that, we will make a further oppression, will add to their injustice and oppression. So viewers, if you have any questions, please raise your hands, and I'll just open your mics, and once we are through with that, inshallah, we'll go on to the next part. Okay, I do have a raised hand, so it's Mushtaq Khan. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, sir. Question about verification before saying something.
I have not been able to hear you. Could you please speak a little louder?
I'm calling you regarding today's Hadith.
Right.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
My question is is about the verification before you say something. Quoting the person that I heard this thing from this person, is that enough verification?
Well, when you say that you've heard something from this person, you are actually admitting the fact that you've not verified it, and whatever you are transmitting, you're transmitting on the basis of the information provided by another person. So that's like a point of caution to the person, to the other person to whom you are transmitting, by saying that this is how I have heard. So you are expressing your inability that I have not actually verified what I have heard, but this is what such and such a person says. So that could be a safe way in which you transmit the information, by actually absolving yourself that I have yet to verify it. This is how I have heard it from the other person. And I think that this too should be undertaken when there is some need for it. Otherwise, it is best that we not transmit at all something which is not verified by the person from whom we are transmitting, especially if it is related to the honor or some important aspect of a person's life. It is only when there is something which is very important that we should actually attribute it to the person from whom we have heard, and absolving ourselves that we have not heard it, and so that the responsibility does not come to us. But as I said, this too should be done in times or in circumstances when we think that this is absolutely necessary.
Thank you.
And let me also point this out. I think you would agree that if we stop transmitting news which is hearsay and we stop gossiping, I think most of our gatherings and most of our sittings would remain silent, and we would have very little to say. And one of the golden advantages of silence is this, that you should only utter when you are absolutely sure that whatever you are saying is very close to the truth, to the best of your ability, and you're not saying something of which you are not sure of. And this is why I think that if we adopt this attitude, we would remain more silent, we would listen more, we would verify more, instead of spending more time in talking more and in transmitting more. Because you see, we have this inkling, we have this thrill to transmit new information to the other person, and this thrill is something which really makes us happy, or it causes a buzz in us. So we have to control ourselves, and we have to realize that it could be a thrill for us, but ultimately this thrill might be damaging for the other person. So I think we don't have any further questions, so I'll move on to the next part of our study circle, and this relates to some of the misconceptions that have, or wrong attitudes that we have generally adopted in our lives. And since today we were talking about charity and charitable behavior, I would like to point out some of the wrong attitudes and misconceptions regarding charity and charitable behavior in this session. Dear viewers, as I have said, first of all, that we need to understand that charity and charitable behavior must not be thought of as something which is merely confined to spending money or currency. This is just one form of charity. It's not the only form. There are so many other forms of charity. By spending time with other people, by using our skills for the benefit of other people, by actually asking other people to help a certain person about which we think that we are not in a position to help, by praying to the Almighty that God help people because I am unable to do so. So there are so many ways of being charitable. So the first thing that we need to understand and realize is that charity does not start with money. In fact, that is just the easiest way perhaps to spend, because we have the money and it's just a question of showing this willingness to spend. Otherwise, giving time to other people, spending our skill set for the benefit of humanity is much more difficult. And then asking for other people, asking other people to spend for a certain cause is also very difficult for our self-esteem. It really is difficult for me when I ask someone, okay, please, if you have some spare money or spare time or spare skills for such and such a reason, then please divert it to this person. It's very difficult for me to do that, but this is what I should do. I should try my best as far as I can to do it myself, and if I'm not able to do it, I should request my friends. It's just like picking up the phone, or maybe emailing someone, or maybe WhatsApping someone, or maybe messaging someone that if there is a person who is in need and if there is something that can be done. So it's not always our own pockets which are able to come to the rescue of people. At times it is our appeal to our friends, our acquaintances, those who we know. We can ask them and we can tell them. Similarly, viewers, another way of being charitable is to spend regular time in some sort of community work, some sort of voluntary work. We have so many areas in which there are non-governmental organizations, the NGOs and charitable organizations who are working in various sectors, like they are working for the blind, they are working for people who are uneducated, they are working for people who are not blessed, they don't have food, they don't have shelter. So there are so many things, or they are inflicted with ill health. So there are so many organizations which are working for the betterment of people. So when you pool your efforts in such organizations, when you come together, it becomes even more effective. So another way of charity is to volunteer regularly in our society and look right and left for people. We have to reach out for people. We must not let people coming to us. That's a secondary thing. Our primary responsibility is that we must reach out to people as far as we can. And this is best done if we read the newspaper, we are aware of our social media, we know things which are going on around us, people who are deprived in any way, and there are so many organizations which are working for their benefit. So the first thing that I wanted to stress upon was that charity does not merely come through spending money. It comes through giving time, it comes to giving your energy, your efforts, your skill set, praying for other people, asking from other people to help other people, working for charity organizations, spending spending our skill set in these charity organizations. So there are so many ways in which we can become more charitable, more generous, more connected with the society. And let me tell you that ultimately, of course, when we become charitable, it does have a positive effect on our own, on our society. But let me tell you that it has the greatest effect on our own selves. Charitable behavior has the most productive effect on our own selves. We become spiritually satisfied. We become spiritually elated. We become spiritually fulfilled. It is as if something has really drenched our souls. So when we eat food, we actually provide fodder and energy to our bodies. And when we do this kind of work, we provide energy and fodder to our soul, which of course needs to be nourished, just as the body needs to be nourished. So we have to be very, very caring of other people, and as I said, being charitable and being caring of other people is not just through money. It has a host of different varieties and a host of different things, and not the least one of which is praying for other people whom we cannot reach, who are maybe far off from who are struck by calamities, by tsunamis, by hurricanes, by cyclones, and we are very far off from them and we are not able to do anything for them. But one thing we can surely do, and that is pray to the Almighty for their well-being. The second thing, dear viewers, I'd like to point out regarding charitable behavior, which we often overlook, is that at times we shy away if we have a small amount to give to other people. We think that since the need of the other person is a lot, this is something that if we give maybe a couple of dollars, maybe a couple of rupees or a couple of pounds, how can this be of help to the other person? Now this is a very big test of us. We must realize that at times it is only that small amount which does make a difference. And if everyone in his own capacity or her own capacity contributes that small amount, you can well imagine how a drop can become an ocean, how a drop can become a sea, and how a drop can become a waterfall. So we must not shy away even if we have a small amount to give. We must not shy away. We must not refrain from spending for the cause of the Almighty if the amount that we have is meager. Because another thing that we need to remember is that our test in this case is that we spend whatever we can afford. So at times the Almighty is just testing how far do we go in testing our own selves. So the second thing I would say is that let us not shy away if we have a small amount. The third, I would say, pitfall of charitable behavior, which in fact I already discussed a while ago, is that we must not show off our charitable behavior. This is the worst thing that can happen. We must not pose what we have done, and this should be as it is also mentioned by Jesus in one of his sermons, that the right hand should not know what the left hand did, which in fact means that if we are spending, it should be so silently and so quietly and in such secrecy that even you yourself are not fully aware what you have done. Just of course a metaphor in telling us that expressing our piety, expressing our good deeds before others is unwarranted. Except I do think that there is an exception in this, and that is that when we want to teach our children, at times we want to teach our students and our children to be charitable, and we do spend by actually spending in front of them and making this a point that they see what we are doing. So, and if this is the intention, that we have to teach our young ones, then of course that is something which we can do. But other than that, we must not boast our charity, we must not do it in front of other people. And since we are talking about teaching our younger generation to become charitable, another thing which can become really helpful in this matter is that we should actually give them pocket money for the purpose of charity. So in order to make them more akin to charity, in order to make this habit develop in them, that they become charitable to other people, like the pocket money which we give them for their own purpose, let us give them some amount in which we tell them that this is the amount that you're not going to spend on your own self, this is the amount that you're going to spend on the society, on people who are around you and who are deprived. So this is a way in which we can develop this charitable behavior, this charitable attitude amongst our children, by telling them that the money that I am giving you as your father or as your mother or as your parent is to be spent on other people. Then, my dear viewers, another thing that I'd like to point out here is that we should actually save for charity as well. You see, we save for our needs, we save for our children, we save for our future, we save for so many things. So let us save money for the purpose of charity. Because you see, at times when there is this need of showing charitable behavior or spending, we are at times left with nothing. So instead of perhaps doing other things or feeling ashamed, I think one of the ways to go about is that we can actually find time that every day, for example, we save some money and put it in a box or in a sachet. For example, a couple of rupees or a couple of dollars or a couple of pounds, maybe if there 10 pence or maybe it's just 2 rupees or 5 rupees, we keep them putting in a box. And at the end of the month, we are bound to have a sizable amount of money, which can of course be very helpful for us. And another thing that I'd like to point out regarding charitable behavior is that there are people in our society who have this self-esteem, who have this self-honor in them, that they are not able to express their needs before other people. So it is our responsibility to reach out to them. It is our responsibility to first go near them, and because there are people who are not going to find out, they are not going to express their needs before us. And the Quran has actually pointed them out by saying that La yas'alun nasa ilhafa. They are not people who actually start begging in a way which is at times very shameful. They don't do it in a very emphatic way. So they are people who are the white collar people. They are people to whom we have to reach, because they are not going to ask for their needs. It is we who must ask for them or from them what they need. So a neighbor in need, a friend in need, a relative in need, who is not going to ask himself or herself, deserves our help the most. And it is here that we must sharpen our antennas, we must sharpen our ears, we must keep our eyes open, that people who are around us, they might seem very well off from their apparent dealings and from their apparent lives. But when we look a little deeper, we find that they are afflicted with a lot of problems and a lot of losses. It's just because they don't put words or give words to their miseries that we often end up misinterpreting them as if they are very well off. this is not always the case. We have to realize that this happens very, very rampantly in our society, and it goes unchecked. And finally, dear viewers, I must also point this out, that at times we are in need, and this is what the Quran actually calls the pinnacle of charity. And it says this in Surah Hashr, when the words it uses are يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, which means that the highest point of charity, or the biggest form of charity, is that when you give to other people in spite of the fact that you need yourself that money or that particular thing that you would like to spend. So the highest form of charity is that you sacrifice for other people, that you know that you are in need of the thing that you're spending on that person, but out of your sacrifice you think that I'm going to give it away to my brother, to my sister. This is what's called the ultimate charity by the Quran. And I have heard people who do this, that when they sacrifice their needs for other people, seldom does the God leave them alone. And when the time comes for their own needs to be fulfilled, it is as if the Almighty has given them, as one of the Quranic verses says, يَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. They are drenched with what they gave to other people, from instances that they could not have even imagined. يَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. God will bless them in ways that they cannot even think of, they cannot even imagine. And lastly, viewers, before I sign off and invite you to ask questions, I would also urge all of you, if not already, that please become a donor of your organs before death overtakes any of us. Let us make this will, that our eyes, our liver, our skin, there are so many things that we have that can be very useful for other people. We must donate our organs as far as we can for the benefit of mankind, for the benefit of humanity. This is an act of piety which does not require anything, because if at all it does require anything, it is the will of our people who are left behind, of our heirs, and we must tell them that once we pass away, they must not be a cause of hindrance if we are donating our organs for the benefit of people. And I think that this is something that we must all make a note of and try our best to look around for hospitals and clinics and facilities and other organizations which take these donations, these organs, and then they actually pass them on to people who need them. So with these words, we come to an end to this study circle, and I'm now opening your mics for all those who would like to ask a question. Please go ahead. I can see Yasin Fahad. I'm going to unmute your mic. You need to, I think it's self-muted. Could you please unmute your mic? Yasin Fahad, it's your mic is self-muted. You have to unmute your mic. Kindly unmute your mic. Kindly unmute your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. I have a question about the organ donation. Like, if you want to do it, but you tell your husband, I'm planning to do this, and because they will afterwards they have to be responsible for your funeral and everything, and they don't agree to it. What do you do?
Well, this is something that you have to impress upon them before you pass away. It's like discussing with them, and it's like telling them that I am the owner of my body. It's like making a will for the money that you are responsible. It's very similar to that. Just as we have been given money to dispense, we have the right to make a will for the money that we have been blessed with. The Almighty has given us this right that we can write down a will, we can deposit that will, we can actually make a legal document out of that, so that if there is a dispute, that document can be referred to. In a similar way, you write a will and you classify that will by writing it on stamp paper and registering it in a court of law, in which you can actually tell them that you are living in such and such an area, and once you pass away, such and such organs would be given. So this is something which has to be debated and discussed with your heirs as well, like your husband, the parents, and spouses and children. They have to be told that just as I have been given the right to give wealth to other people, I have the same right regarding my body as well. and I would expect them to honor my right. And if they do not do so, it's up to them, because I might ask from them on the day of judgment that why did they not honor my will when they did so in many other cases. So you can even tell them that they'll be held responsible for not honoring our will. That's as far as we can go. Even if they do not do this, even after all this arrangement that we have made, then of course we are not responsible. I think we'll get the reward for our intention. The Almighty will then of course reckon with these people who did not carry out our will.
Okay. I have another question. If nobody else is asking, then I will ask.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. I have a question about the inheritance. If a son or a daughter dies before the parents does, and they have children, will the share of the son or the daughter who is deceased now, will their share be given to the grandchildren when the parents die?
Right. So first thing that you need to understand is that this is a matter of ijtihad, and this is one area which the Quran is left to our own reason and opinion. The Quran itself has not made any legislation regarding an orphaned grandchild. So this is a typical case of an orphaned grandchild in which the deceased is the father and he has children, and a grandparent has wealth which he passes on. So in this regard, there are two opinions, and one of the opinion is that nothing will be given to the deceased children unless, of course, a will had been made, or the grandfather makes a will that he can do that if he thinks that his child has passed away and if the grandchildren are in need. But the other opinion in this regard, which I subscribe to, is that if in this case the children or the grandchildren, they actually take the place of the children themselves. In the absence of your child, if he is deceased, the grandchild is elevated in the same position as being your child, and the word walad, which is used by the Quran, can be applied to them as well, and hence the share of the child will be passed on to the grandchild. So for example, if your son had passed away, then whatever the share of that son was will be given to his children. So that is how I interpret it. And as I said, there can be two opinions about it. There are two opinions. There has been a group of scholars who does not give anything to the orphan grandchild except if the will has been made by the grandparent. And as far as I am concerned, I think that the ijtihad done by scholars who say that the orphan grandchild will get the share of his deceased parent, I go along with their opinion.
Divided the same way, like let's say the deceased person has two sons and one daughter.
It should be divided. Of course, it should be divided in the way in which it is done, which means that the son will get twice as that of the daughter.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, since we do not have any further questions, viewers, I now end this session, and inshallah hope to see you next Saturday on the same time. Until then, it is Khuda Hafiz.